Uh, I'm going to be talking about Romans 1:8 today. We're going to start off with Romans 1:8. Romans has been a book that I've been kind of in for probably 2 years. And I can't seem to be, I don't get very far because I get kind of on one verse today, and that's what I'm going to do my whole message basically about. And I want to read Romans 1:8. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is being reported all over the world. You know, I guess first thing I just want to pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask that you open the ears of our hearts. Lord, I just ask that you indwell within this place this day, that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart would be pleasing and edifying and glorifying to you. And I thank you and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. You know, Paul, he hadn't really ever visited the Roman church when he wrote to them. He didn't know the church personally. He had only heard about them. You know, he possibly knew some of the people in the church, but he hadn't really known them too well. But the church's testimony for Christ was so strong that it was being talked about around the world. And that's kind of when you think about, like, Rome at the time, the believers living there, they were living in the midst of an immoral, unjust, corrupt society. Because Rome was a crossroads for a lot of traffic of people came and went throughout Rome. And the believers were serving Christ faithfully there. It was reported that they shared Christ, ministering into wherever they came in contact with, as a daily basis. So much that some of them were known by name around the world. And I got to thinking about this, about being known around the world. And basically what I'm thinking about is us as a little white church, as believers. You know, are we being reported around the world? You know, during the summertime, we get all these visitors. I mean, it's just amazing how many different visitors from all over the country will come and share, while they're on vacation, and come and want to worship the Lord. And I was just kind of thinking of what kind of a testimony do we have that they would actually go and talk about us around the world. So what that brought me to then was that, and I guess this is probably why this particular scripture in the last 2 years I've skipped over it, because it was going to bring me to a point where I had to take a good look at my testimony. And that's what I actually am going to share with you today, is my own personal testimony. This is the last few weeks, the Lord has been waking me up at 5:30 in the morning and reminding me of some of that past that I have chosen to block out because I'm not very proud of it. But I knew today that I'm supposed to share this with you. And I just wanted to, I started drinking probably in the 6th grade. I remember what happened was there was 5 of us boys, and we got all the money we could put together between the 5 of us. And there was a wino in Keystone, and we gave him all our money, and he was able to buy 4 bottles of really cheap wine. And of course, he took one of those bottles, so now you have 5 boys and 3 bottles of wine to share, and how in the world are you going to do that? So we took the cap off, we threw it away, stood in a circle. You take a drink and pass it until it was empty. You took the next one and passed it around until it was empty, and the third one. That was the first time in my life I remember ever being drunk. I remember that feeling. I didn't necessarily like the taste of the wine to get to that point, but I like that feeling. And it just, I like that feeling that basically that was what I did. I would chug beer, I would chug liquor until I reached that point. So basically, every high school dance, and as I was going to high school here in Hill City, this good friend of mine would find a bottle of whiskey, and we'd drive out of town and just back and forth, pass it, come back to the dance. Within just a few minutes, we were drunker than skunks. You know, and that was my way of life all through high school. There was a thing happened while I was in. It was at a party out at Sheridan Lake on the beach out there, and I was in town and I was going back to Sheridan Lake, and the road now that you drive on is not the way it used to be. And as there used to be where you headed right towards this rock wall, and then the road just curved and went around it. Well, what happened is I passed out as I was driving, and I was headed towards that rock wall. Just, I don't know how far before it, but just before I hit that rock wall, this bright light woke me up. I slammed on my brakes and turned the wheel, and I didn't do anything to my vehicle. I didn't. It was just it was the first time that the Lord saved me. You know, I had some other instances of drinking. We partied all night long, and I went that next morning and signed up for the Army. That was really, it was one of those things where if your foot could reach up and kick yourself, you would have, but it just didn't work. You know, I was in the Army, got drunk one night, signed up to go to Vietnam. Thought it was the thing to do. I was in Vietnam only a very short time, and I got drunk. We were under a mortar attack. I was in a compound, and we had the barbed wire and the big berm of dirt surrounding us, and we were under attack. And I was so drunk that I ran out there up on top of this mound of dirt where I was like this big target sitting up there. It was just kind of, and because of that, well, I decided that I wasn't really going to drink anymore. But then it's where I started drinking or smoking marijuana, was in Vietnam. And they had some really, really good marijuana over there. Yeah. And you could buy a whole pillowcase full of it for $10. But anyway, a situation happened over in Vietnam that I got so high one night on guard duty that I fell asleep. During wartime, and I don't know if it still is true yet today, but at wartime, if you fall asleep on guard duty, they can shoot you at sunrise. We weren't in Vietnam. It was I can't remember what they called it, but we weren't actually in war, which I was very thankful for that. When I came back from Vietnam, I had a really, really hard time dealing with life. Things are different. I was different. And I still had 16 months left in the Army. And I was assigned to Fort Carson, Colorado. I was only in Carson, Colorado for 4 days, and they were going to go out and play war games for 11 days. And so they give you a gun with fake bullets. And anyway, they told me to go, I had to go dig a foxhole and protect our perimeter. Well, I hadn't digging a foxhole a whole year or 11 months and 29 days. I was in Vietnam. I wasn't going to dig a foxhole, but I found a little indention kind of in the ground by this tree, and so that was my foxhole, and I was just kind of relaxing there. And this guy snuck up on me and shot me, and he put this little red tag on me that told me I was dead. So I thought, well, geez, if I'm dead, there's no reason for me to stay out here anymore. So I hitched a ride back with the cooks back to the compound, and I spent the next 10 days with me and the clerk at the barracks, and we were the only ones there. But anyway, I don't know, they really frowned on that kind of stuff. And, you know, and the thing why this all was, for me too, is that I was 20 years old when I came back. I couldn't even drink. I couldn't drink legally in a bar. It was just kind of, and then what happened was that when I came back and I was in Fort Carson, I kind of started running around with some guys that started doing the harder drugs. There was an incident that happened that I was busted, and at this point in time I only had 2 marijuana joints on me. This was back a few years, back in 1969. It was kind of a little bigger deal back then. The first time I went before the judge, I was sentenced to 10 years in jail and a $10,000 fine. I had just gotten back from Vietnam, so I had this attorney that I dressed up in my Class A uniform. I stood at attention the whole time, and he was really good at what he did. And he said this young man never ever smoked pot till he went to Vietnam. He got over there because of the war. This is why this happened to him. And they were very lenient with me, and they let me off with a $250 fine. But the deal was again, the Army just did not really care for me very well, and they actually let me out early so that I could go to the School of Mines to try school, but that didn't work either. So then I was back in Keystone, where I was born and raised. Keystone was always a party town for us, for me and my brother. And I got wrapped up in that whole 70s drug culture thing. I'd be working all week. I'd work all week. I always worked hard, but I would be drinking and smoking pot every day. I always had a couple of joints with me that as soon as I got done with work that day, I would smoke some pot. On the weekends, I was partying with every drug. Now, I have no idea exactly how many trips of what I consider the hard drugs, with the acid, the mescaline, the coke. The thing is with coke, I always thought, well, as long as you don't shoot it in your arm, you're not really a drug addict. And so I would snort coke with $100 bills. So I wasn't really truly a drug addict. I had control, so I thought. In 1972, I was married with a kid on the way, and I backed off the hard drugs then because I was having this little baby. I had this little big girl, but I was still smoking pot on a regular basis. In 1972, some of you know about the flood that happened around here and in Keystone, the flood of 1972. There was, I'm not sure how many people in Rapid City and around. I know there was 13 people in Keystone that drowned that night. They were all tourists, nobody from the town. But when that flood happened, I was living in I was living in a trailer house next to my dad's house, and there was 3 trailer houses in a row. And my wife at the time woke me up by beating on my back because the night before I'd gotten 3 hours sleep because during construction I was the finish. We were pouring concrete, and I had to be the finish man, and we did all the stuff with a hand trowels, and so I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning, had 2 hours of sleep, up at 5 o'clock to go back to work. And so that night I was really tired, and I remember getting up, and in a trailer house you're at the